Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibilityman. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Ben Ampil. He is a neuroscience and neurolinguistic programming coach. He talks about leadership, happiness, and high performance. His motto is, if you do not mind your mind, you will not manage your behavior. Ben Empel, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Stephen, the Possibility Man. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all the way from Manila, Philippines.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I have a ton of questions to ask, but first, a reminder to our listeners and our viewers follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Ben, as I said, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a very long time. Thank you for clearing space for me. But I'm interested in your background before you got into neurosciences and also NLP. I know that you're an engineer. Can you give us a glimpse into your professional background?
There was a guy named Tony Robbins.
Uh,
I think everybody knows him. He's now in his late. I don't follow his age, but he's got gray hair now. This will date me, but Stephen, I don't know if you came across cassette
Conceptics?
recorders. Uh,
No.
oh, you're a young man.
Uh,
Um, before the DVDs, before the
okay.
flash drives,
Okay.
before the CDs, there were cassette recorders.
Oh, yeah.
These were
Yeah. Yeah.
actually these were
Yeah.
actually physical tapes,
Okay.
which you can record and erase and record over.
Yes.
And back here in Manila, those cassette tapes that were not selling, they would sell at a huge discount. So there's a pile in the middle of the bookstore filled with a lot of cassette tapes of well-known authors which were not selling. One of them was Tony Robbins. Mr.
Mm.
Robbins, my apology, but that's how I got to meet you.
Mhm.
And the title was Unleash Your Power Within, which is one of
Ah,
his earlier books.
okay.
And it was being sold for, this is just for illustrative purposes. You would buy a blank unrecorded cassette tape then for about 20 pesos.
Uh-huh.
His was selling for 1 peso.
Huh.
So I figured if I didn't like the content, I could just erase over it. So I bought it.
Mhm.
And what the content was, the cassette tape of Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within just blew my mind.
Wow.
And I began to do research on what he was talking about. There was no Google back then,
Uh,
so I had to do a lot of manual research, and eventually it led me that he was actually using neurolinguistic programming. He just
ah,
changed the name to make it easier to digest
okay.
because the origins of NLP, neurolinguistic programming, which was founded by Richard Bandler and John Grinder back in the 1970s in California, it was rather esoteric. It would make your eyebrows knit. Tony had a way of making it easy for one
Mm.
peso. And this is not
Mm.
$1, this is one Philippine peso. So
Mhm.
I had a deal. I pursued him and I got myself into NLP because of him. And
Wow.
then I began teaching NLP here in the Philippines, even while I was employed in my corporate job. I graduated from civil engineering, actually.
Okay.
So I would like to say back then, I want to construct lives. And then lately, just before the pandemic, there's been a lot of buzz about neuroscience, and we can
Mhm.
go into the distinction later on. So I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
myself certified in that.
Okay.
So now I'm into neuroscience and neurolinguistic programming.
Okay, well, let's talk about these because you mentioned neuro linguistic programming first, NLP, and there's neuro in that title. Is NLP a science in the sense that neuroscience is a science?
No, actually, it's one of the main criticisms about it. The
Mm.
founders, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, one was a programmer, computer programmer, one was a linguist. And
Mm.
I use Batman and Robin to make it easy,
Yeah.
starting with NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And to our friends listening, do not Google NLP because it also stands for natural language programming,
Huh.
which is now in vogue because of ChatGPT.
Okay.
It's one of the systems they use. So
Mm.
if you just put in NLP, it might give you natural language programming. So
Uh-huh.
neurolinguistic programming, it's a mouthful. And
Mm.
even the definition alone will not fit in a Scrabble word.
Right.
So I use Batman and Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Robin is the character I used to define NLP, neuro linguistic programming. Robin stands for R, radical, OB, observations, that IN influences your behavior. So
Oh,
radical observations that influences your behavior. And that
okay.
is actually how Richard Bandler and John Grinder began their journey that led to NLP. For
Mm-hmm.
example, there was this, and again, this is back in the 70s. There was this very well known family therapist named Virginia Satir.
Okay.
And then Richard Bandler was actually boarding in her house because he was trying to save rent as a working student.
Uh-huh.
And one day, Richard asked Virginia, "Can I shadow you? Can I
Mm.
follow you at work?" And Virginia said, "Sure." And then Richard said, "Can I take notes?" Virginia said, "Sure." And what Virginia does is she just does couple counseling. Husband and wife who are not getting well, who are not relating well,
Mm-hmm.
is making them relate better. Richard would just watch. And then what he noticed is that what the couples were saying were actually the same,
Mm.
except that the predicates, or we have five senses.
Mm-hmm.
The sensory base by which one and the other are using are different. For
Mm.
example, I would say, Possibilityman, Stephen, I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
That looks good.
Mm-hmm.
What sense am I addressing?
Mm.
That looks good. I see your
Yeah.
point.
That
What
looks
sense
good.
am I?
Which sense? You're putting me to the test. Let's
No,
see.
no.
What sense? Yeah.
Yes,
What
I
sense
see
of
your
the five
point.
senses? Mm-hmm.
Yes, that looks good. I see
Uh-huh.
your point.
Yeah.
Visual.
Well,
It's a visual predicate,
okay.
as opposed to some people. Some would say, "I hear you loud and clear."
Uh-huh.
That sounds good. That
Okay.
is an auditory predicate.
Uh-huh.
So what Virginia just noticed is that both parties were saying the same thing, but they
Hmm.
were using different, they were prioritizing different sensory predicates.
I see.
So, for
Okay.
example, you say, "Ben, that sounds good."
Uh-huh.
That means you are predominantly auditory, you,
Huh.
sound based. And
Okay.
none is better. All of them are equally good. And I
Hmm.
say, "Stephen, I see your point. I am
Hmm.
visual. We
Okay.
will not communicate well because our sensory primaries are different."
That's
So
interesting.
what
Yeah.
Virginia would say is just, "Hey, can you translate one to the other?
Mhm.
Align your," and it's called predicates. Align your predicates. And so began. It's called representational systems. And I
Hmm.
say this for those who might want to Google this afterwards.
Hmm.
When I say something, when something exists in reality, it is presented to us. For example, this is my phone.
Hmm.
It is presented to me. But when I describe it to you, I represent it to you.
Right.
I try to describe it in a way other than what it really is, because
Hmm.
it is in my own words. So our representational systems can either be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic.
Hmm.
uh, I feel what you're saying,
Hmm.
something like that. There's the senses of gustatory or eating and olfactory or smelling are not really dominant in conversation.
Right. Well,
So
let me ask you that. So
that's
in some
go ahead.
cultures in the United States, some back in the day and even now, some kids would say, "I feel you." What type of predicate is that? I feel you. Like I feel what you're saying.
I'll throw the question back to you.
Uh-huh.
When you feel something, well, the technical term is kinesthetic.
Uh-huh.
And you're right on point, spot on, Stephen. I
Uh-huh.
feel you.
Yeah.
So when somebody, and you can actually gauge it based on their professions.
Mm.
People who are artistic, painters, photographers are more visual in the way they illustrate to represent the world.
Mhm.
People who are more precise, accountants, lawyers,
Mhm.
programmers, are more auditory. I hear you. And people
Right.
who are more expressive athletically, athletes or people who are in physical professions, are more kinesthetic.
Okay.
So you would expect, for example, somebody who's an athlete to say, Stephen, I feel you.
Right.
Or a cameraman to say, Stephen, I see your point.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you associate NLP with Robin, from the Batman series? Is it, Robin, as I recall, was more emotional, more bombastic, is that why you connect NLP to Robin? That is emotions that we display?
No, not at all. It's only
Okay.
because Batman and Robin were the only ones that gave me the
Uh,
appropriate consonants and syllables.
I got you. I got you. So nothing
Right.
else other than that. So, okay. So neuro-linguistic programming is one thing that you do teach. Now, how did you get into neuroscience? And what's the difference between neuroscience and NLP?
Right. Um, NLP is behavior based, observation based.
Uh-huh.
As we were describing about representational system,
Right.
Richard Bandler was just observing, shadowing Virginia Satir, who happened to be an exemplar in terms of putting family therapy was the term.
Mm.
Also, if you've heard of the word rapport, or
Yes.
when you talk to somebody, stick in rapport,
Yeah.
that is actually coined from a famed hypnotherapist named Milton Erickson.
Mm.
Now, Milton Erickson was again shadowed by Richard Bandler, and
Uh-huh.
he noticed that Milton Erickson was able to instill dramatic change in a very short time.
Wow.
Whereas when you look, and the only hypnosis I witnessed was those done in Vegas, so
Mm.
I wouldn't put a lot of credibility on them. So, for example, the one way that you can get somebody to fall aligned with the way you're feeling
Mm.
is to get them to breathe the same way you're breathing. Milton
Wow.
Erickson was actually paralyzed waist down, so he was wheelchair limited. But whenever he would talk to a client, he would be tapping his finger to
Mm.
match the breathing of the client. So, example, you are the client of Milton. He would
Mhm.
tap his finger to match your breathing, and then slowly he would tap the finger in a slower pace. And
Mm.
subconsciously, because you were drawn to his behavior, your breathing was match his pace.
Wow.
So that means that we'll go to mirror neurons. That is now on the realm of neuroscience.
Uh-huh.
You are able to relate at least on the way that you're breathing, and he can now instruct you subconsciously, and your mind would be open.
Mm.
That's
Well,
why, yeah, go ahead.
does the same apply to speaking? For example, if someone is speaking real fast and you're speaking with them and you slow it down,
Yes,
would you expect them to mirror what you're doing?
yes, it's called mirror and matching.
Uh-huh.
Uh, the sad thing now is that it's now known to everybody. It's actually taught in sales, negotiations,
Uh-huh.
even hostage management, that
Okay.
people expect it. So, for
Mhm.
example, you are agitated,
Yeah.
and you are speaking with a high pitched voice, rapid
Right.
tone,
Mhm.
and I say, calm down, Stephen. You will not.
Mhm.
But if I
Right.
match your tone,
Mhm.
Stephen, I understand why you're angry. Can you please calm down with me? So I
Ah,
match it and then I lead. So I
right.
match you, then I lead.
That's so I love it. Because that could, I could see that happening in relationships.
Yes.
Any kind of relationship, two individuals are beginning to argue, right? And you're saying that if one party matches the other person, but then leads them, the other person may be able to calm down. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. And
Uh-huh.
that is based on observation,
Uh-huh.
NLP, as opposed to neuroscience, which is based on science. Now the difference is that science can be replicable.
Okay.
Gravity is gravity. I
Mhm.
throw the ball up, it will come down the same velocity. Whereas behavior may not be replicable
Mhm.
because that is totally arbitrary on the state of the person doing it.
Mhm.
So that's the
Mhm.
main difference between the two. If I
Mhm.
may jump to Batman just to put them together,
Okay.
uh, I define neuroscience using Batman because every time I mention I teach neuroscience, people leave. So in order to get them to stay, I say I define neuroscience using Batman.
Mm,
Neuroscience is the study of the B brain, how it A acts, how it E thinks, Bat,
mm,
so that you
mm,
can manage your actions and thoughts.
mm.
Batman.
Got it. Look, you once said, I'm going to read this quote, and something if I got it wrong. You said, as I saw it, the brain determines who we are, how we think, and how we act. Did you say, do you still stand by that assertion? The brain determines who we are, how we think, how we act.
Yes, exactly. It is our brain that determines our personality. I
Uh-huh.
just came from my dentist, and
Okay.
they tell us visit your dentist twice a year.
Mm.
Your teeth does not determine your personality. Now, if
Uh-huh.
you're in show business, you need good teeth in order to give you confidence.
Mm.
But in and by itself, it does not determine your personality. I also went to my skin doctor. A lot of people have dermatological applications to make them look better.
Mm.
That makes you look better, but it does not determine your personality.
Mm.
You see some people who may not exactly look like Brad Pitt, but they
Mm.
act with so much confidence as if they are
Yeah.
the best looking individual on the planet. It's
Mm.
the brain.
The
Now, our
brain.
brain
Mm.
determines who we are,
Mm.
our personality. One of the most basic definitions we need, it determines how we act and how we think. Yet, most people know more about how their phones work than
Mm.
how their brains work.
Mm.
Now, that
Okay.
may be acceptable years before when knowledge was not yet available.
Mm.
But with the uh, predominance of knowledge and research, every day there's something new about the brain that's coming out. We
Right.
have no excuse. We have
Right.
no excuse.
Yeah. So let's talk about the brain then. Help us understand this brain. What is the structure of the brain? And talk to us now like we're third graders.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, that will be hard, but we will try.
Okay.
This hand will represent basically our brain. By the way, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a part of the brain that is visible to the human eye, and those are our eyes. Our eyes are actually part of the brain. During
Wow.
our conception in our mother's womb,
Mm.
it is pushed out of the cranial skull so that it's outside. Our eyes are actually part of the brain. And we never think of the brain that way. We think it's just everything that's inside the skull.
Mm.
So imagine that my hand is the brain, my wrist is the brain stem.
Mm.
It is what connects the what we think of as the brain, crumpled paper, the one with ridges connected to your spinal column.
Mm.
When and the brainstem is responsible for mechanical activities, things
Mm.
that keep us alive, that are robotic, your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your pupils blinking. So
Mm.
everything that's mechanical is done by the brainstem. That's
Mm.
why if you encounter an accident that severs your brainstem, you die because
Mm.
all of the things that keep you alive will no longer be supported.
Mm.
And then if you put your thumb inside,
Mm.
that is called the emotional brain. A lot of
Mm.
people have heard about the amygdala, freeze, fight, or flight.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So that's the thumb. And then if
Mm.
you close your brain, that resembles the crumpled paper.
Okay.
That's actually the cortex.
Mm.
Cortex only means covering. So the
Mm.
whole thing is cortex, and we're interested in the part of the cortex behind our forehead.
Uh-huh.
That is referred to as the prefrontal cortex.
Mm.
That is responsible for executive thinking, decision making, planning. Now, if you ask yourself, Stephen, what is the key to success among the animal kingdom?
Mm.
We're not the largest. That's the elephant. We're not the tallest. That's the giraffe. We
Right.
cannot swim. We cannot fly. We cannot camouflage ourselves.
Mm.
Yet we lord it over the animal kingdom. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of our brain. We have
Wow.
the most sophisticated cortex,
Yeah.
and the ridges in our brain actually double the folds. If you
Yeah.
were, and friends, don't try this at home, if you were to cut out your brain and lay it on the floor, it would take up 9 square feet
Hmm.
of area. That's large. And it's because of the folds that gives
Mm.
additional computing power to our brain.
Mm.
Don't try this at home again. If you were
Yeah.
to dissect the brain of a cat,
Mm.
the brain of a cat is very smooth,
Mm.
has no ridges. So
Mm.
that gives you an idea about the computing power of a cat. So we
Right.
have a lot of computing power, and it is because of our brain that enables us to survive
Mm.
and thrive despite the fact that we do not have the physical strengths that the
Mm.
other animals have.
Mm-hmm.
Many animals do not plan 1 week ahead
Right.
or even for tomorrow. Everything's just instinctive for the animals. When they
Mm-hmm.
talk about planning for the winter, it's
Yeah.
not actually planning per se, it's planning because it's built into them that
Mm.
we have to store food because it's going to be winter and there's going to be no food.
Right.
But
Right.
Christmas is coming, Stephen.
Yeah.
What are your plans?
Yeah. Traveling to Las Vegas.
Animals can't
Yeah.
do that, and you're
Yeah.
able to do that because of your
Right.
prefrontal cortex.
Yeah. So what about the limbic system? Is that a part of the brain as well? And where is it located?
Uh, the limbic the limbic system is a part of the brain, and it's
Mm.
actually composed of many other parts.
Okay.
The one that is most known is the amygdala.
Uh-huh.
It's getting a bad rap because the amygdala is the one that feels the emotions.
Mm.
And since our brain has only three programs to keep us alive, for social connections, and to let us achieve our highest being. So survival is actually a very primitive programming. The
Mm.
limbic system is one of the earliest part of the brain to be developed. The prefrontal cortex is one of the last parts of the brain to be developed.
Mm.
It is normally developed at age 24. That's why if you ever wonder why
Four.
teenagers behave the way they do, they
Mm.
still do not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. And
Wow.
if you think about it, all of us graduated from college without a fully developed prefrontal cortex.
Uh-huh.
So
No.
the
Yeah.
limbic system is part of the brain.
Mm.
It is responsible, and it has many components other than the amygdala. There's
Mm-hmm.
the hippocampus in there, there's the basal ganglia in there. Just for example, toward the question, we know of Einstein's famous formula E is equal to mc squared.
Yes.
We can transpose that into neuroscience, for example, or at
Mm.
least I do. E is equal to emotions. That
Okay.
is care of the amygdala of the limbic system. And
Mm.
then emotions lead to memories.
Right.
Memories is a function of another part of the brain called the hippocampus.
Mm.
And your memory, short-term memories transferred into long-term memory during sleep.
Mm.
That's why it's very important for us to have a good night's sleep. Because
Right.
modern society, they say, I don't want to sleep, it's a waste of time.
Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah.
And then just on the CC, so E is equal to MC squared, emotions, amygdala, limbic system lead to memories, which is the hippocampus, which creates constant choices or habits,
Uh-huh.
which is in the basal ganglia.
Ah,
So you can see that there are a lot of parts that are
right.
involved in that simple equation.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, that's exciting. Now, what's the connection then between the brain and the nervous system?
The brain and the nervous system is actually they're part and parcel. We
Uh-huh.
have we have had this misconception that neuroscience is just the brain. But
Mm.
actually, neuroscience is the study of the brain and the nervous system
Mm.
because the brain is part of the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the nervous system, if you Google a diagram, it will start from the brain connected down to the spinal column and reaches out to, there's no part of your body that doesn't have any nerves. So
Ah.
it's actually your entire body. But
Uh-huh.
it is the brain that is more of the orchestrator,
Mm.
the conductor,
Yeah.
that makes sense of all the inputs coming from all of the points, gazillions of points
Mm.
within your body.
Yeah. Can we feed the brain? And this may seem like an odd question, but I'm curious about it. Can we feed the brain foods to make it function better? Is there a link between the brain and nutrition, for example?
There is very much so.
Mm.
Your food, you are what you eat, is a
Uh-huh.
saying. It is true. There are some areas in the world called blue zone
Yeah.
areas. And these are the areas wherein people live to be 100. and they have analyzed it, and it goes down to basic diet and basic lifestyle. These people are not stressed. They live an active but not an overly stressed life. If there's they would say, for example, but there's some debate in this, that the Mediterranean diet is something that's good for the brain. I'll be the first to say the Filipino diet is not good for the brain because it's very
Uh-huh.
fatty.
Uh-huh.
So we must have better choice in our brain.
Yeah.
Stephen, if I can give the folks something to remember,
Okay.
we define neuroscience with Batman.
Mhm.
Stephen, what's the tagline of the famous rubber shoe with the swoosh logo?
Just do it.
Just do it. So Batman, and if we want to live well, we will just say, but do it. BATDOIT. But
Uh,
change the A to U. So it's but, BUT, but
mhm.
do it. And
Okay.
stands for BU, bottom up, how your body affects your brain. And this is sleep, exercise, and diet. And
Mm.
that is the most important component of your health, actually. It's
Okay.
not what you think, it's how you sleep, it's what you eat, and how much movement you integrate into your life.
Yeah.
If
Well,
there's one thing that, yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Good now, please finish that thought.
Right. So just remember, folks, but do it, but
Uh-huh.
BU, not BA.
Yeah.
BU, bottom up, take care of your body.
Yeah.
Sleep is the number one secret sauce for
Mm-hmm.
success.
Mm-hmm.
I say again, sleep is the number one ingredient for sustainable success. A lot of people hate it because it's not sexy. They want something that's
Yeah.
sexy. No, sleep.
Yeah,
Because if
but
you
we,
do
we
not,
got to talk about this sleep, Ben, because I agree with you. Sleep is important for sure. But, I've noticed that the brain can become excited, which interferes with sleep. And not only excited now because of something bad, but it can be excited because of something good, vacation you're planning. So how does a person then quiet the brain when it's excited for whatever reason so that they can enjoy better sleep?
right, it's a tough word. It's called discipline. Our body operates under cycles in the
Okay.
same manner that we're nearing Christmas, we're nearing another year, we're
Mm.
nearing 2024. The Earth revolves around the sun in 365 days, 364 leap years.
Mm.
We have 24 hours in the day. Our body operates in 90-minute cycles. 90-minute cycles. That's why, for example, whenever I give talks, I
Mm.
say adult learning, 90 minutes. You go beyond it, your brain would just go down. You're wasting. If you go shorter than it, just talk for 1 hour, you're wasting the 30 minutes of attention. So our brain goes uh, in ebbs, peaks, and valleys for 90 minutes. And
Mm.
the key, as I mentioned, is that our eyes are part of the brain. In
Mm.
fact, the visual sense occupies 70% of the total brain space. And the irony is the visual cortex is at the back of the brain. You would think it's up front, it's at the back of the brain.
Mm.
And the vision activity occupies 70%. The other four senses just take out the balance of 30%. So, what triggers the onset of the 90-minute cycles? Sunlight. So,
Mm.
when you wake up, you
Mm.
have to look at the sun. And when your eyes look at the sun, it sends a trigger to your eyes, which is connected to your brain, that
Mm.
oh, it's time to set the 24-hour cycle. And then there's our brain only has two languages:
Mm.
electricity and chemicals.
Mm.
All of the things we do, all of the emotions we feel are just a function of electricity and chemicals.
Mm.
Brain loss of brain function, dementia, that kind of thing, is basically a degrade. Our electrical capability just diminishes over
Right.
age.
Huh.
So whenever somebody comes to me with a love problem, I say that's just chemicals, and
Yeah.
it's scientifically true. So
Okay.
you have electricity and chemicals. So
Uh-huh.
when light hits your eyes, it sets on the 24-hour 90 minutes 90-minute cycle.
Okay.
you will start accumulating a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And this part I'm just saying, putting it out there so people can Google it if they want to.
Mhm.
And then adenosine, once it reaches a critical level, calls on another neurotransmitter which you might be familiar with. It's called melatonin.
Yeah.
And melatonin is what
Mm.
tells us to sleep.
Okay.
So if you don't set your day right in the first place, you
Mhm.
will not accumulate adenosine, which
Okay.
will call on the accumulation of melatonin.
Right. Right. Okay.
And then
So,
yes,
yeah. So, are you suggesting that when we wake up in the morning, we should open up our blinds and look at the light, or can artificial light, like the light in your room, be adequate?
worst case, bright lights, artificial lights would be okay,
Okay.
but the ideal setting would be sunlight.
Okay.
Here in the tropics, like where I am in the Philippines, we're
Mhm.
fortunate to have sun. There are certain countries wherein you have half the year in darkness, half the year in a summer. So
Mhm.
you do have to make some adjustments to that. But
Mhm.
what you have to do is make an effort to expose your eyes to light.
Yeah.
If it's artificial light, make it brighter than normal,
Uh-huh.
but don't stare at it directly because it might damage your vision.
Okay.
Never stare at the sun directly as well. You just
Okay.
want to have the trigger that will tell your body it's time to set the 90-minute
Set the
clock.
clock. Set the clock.
Yes,
Okay. I love
yes.
it. Okay. So let me ask you this then. Let's say that you've written a great book. You have a meeting the next day with the publisher. You want, let's say it's Oxford. You want your book to be published by Oxford Press. And you're excited and you get to bed early at 9 o'clock, by 9 o'clock. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, Ben, you're just so excited that it interfered with your sleep. What do you do? What do you do?
Right. Uh, I'll answer that in two phases. Before the advent of the cell phone, where before the advent of cable news, we would be asleep by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
Our parents, our grandparents would be asleep by then. With the
Mhm.
advent of 24-hour news technology and the smartphone, um, again, what the thing that sets us toward alertness or arousal is light. So
Mhm.
if we are actually staring at our phone at 10 p.m. at night, we are actually still arousing our
Yeah.
brain. So
Mhm.
we should actually quit. Um, if we can redesign, if I can redesign my place right now, I would not have a lot of overhead lights. At
Mhm.
night, when you wake up in the bathroom for a bathroom break at 3 a.m., I would recommend using a flashlight. Or best yet, if you can lay out your house similar to an airplane with floor lights, floor markings,
Mhm.
because the moment you turn on the overhead lights just so that you don't stumble going to the bathroom,
Yeah.
your eyes become subjected to lights and it
Mhm.
sets the other motion again. So that's
Mhm.
the problem we have with modern society. But we
Mhm.
can actually address it with simple common sense. When you wake up after you've fallen asleep and you want to go to the bathroom, there are certain things that you can plug on sockets that give a dim light.
Mhm.
You just don't want to stumble, but don't turn on the full light because it will just wake you up again. And
Uh-huh.
falling back to sleep will be a challenge for you. To your
Mhm.
question about you're excited because your book's being launched, make sure that you cut off your day by 6 p.m. Do
Mhm.
not drink anything that's caffeinated or anything that arouses you. Friends, zero alcohol.
Mhm.
And I know this might cost you a few ratings, a few followers, Stephen. My apologies.
Yeah.
Alcohol shrinks the brain. I get
Mhm.
asked, for example, how much alcohol is good? Zero.
Wow.
Zero.
Yeah. That's good advice, actually. Yeah. So let's talk about then the brain and genetics, the brain and predispositions. Are some of us predisposed to certain health conditions because of our brain, the chemistry and the electricity in our brains?
Yeah, yes, we are. It's not limited to our brains.
Mm.
All of our organs, if it's born with a genetic marker or a predisposition,
Uh-huh.
it affects the way we will grow up to be.
Okay.
The good thing though is that science is just growing exponentially, that a lot of cures are being found now.
Mm.
So to your question, yes, if there's something that's genetically off the mark in our brain, that we will just have to live with it. But
Mm.
with technology, we're able to find ways of coping so that it's as if we're normal.
Right. I've heard a lot about neuroplasticity. Is the brain can a person evolve, to use Joe Dispenza's title of one of his books? Can a person evolve their brain?
Neuroplasticity, the old thinking was the brain that you were born with is the brain that you will die with.
Okay.
And then with advances in technology, they found out that that is not true.
Mm.
It's so they found out that the brain is actually soft,
Mm.
and that your brain actually changes in structure and function depending on experience.
Mm.
Learning, for example, if you learn a new skill, you will find out that the structure and function of your brain has changed. That is what you refer to as neuroplasticity.
Mm.
It is very, very active during our young age, before we reach our teen years. That's why if you want to teach your child a second language, do it while they're young.
Right.
Because the moment they go past the teen years,
Mm.
neuroplasticity still remains, but it becomes harder. So
Mm.
neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change its structure and function depending on experience.
Mm.
What are the implications? And I don't want to be political.
Mm.
For example, you're walking past a door, you open it, and then a spider suddenly falls on your head. How would you feel, Stephen?
Oh, I would jump. Be nervous. Yeah.
Right now, assuming that it's actually a rubber spider, it's not a real spider,
Uh-huh.
you would be we'll use the term loosely, traumatized. It will form a very deep set memory in you, but
Mm.
you might have hesitation in entering doors. You might
Mm.
enter doors more slowly than you would because of the fear of
Right.
one singular event. So any event that meets us with suddenness and intensity forms a very deep memory. And we
Mm.
mentioned earlier, emotions forms memory, forms constant
Mm.
choices or
Mm.
habits. So
Mm.
we have to be careful with that.
Mm.
Again, without being political, what about children exposed to explosions?
Mm.
For
Yeah.
example, a war zone. How will
Yes.
they grow up?
Hmm.
So these are real challenges that face mankind.
For
How do
sure.
you how do you how do you talk to children who have nothing to eat?
Yeah.
And I'm not being political. I'm just saying, with
No.
reference to the brain,
Yeah.
that the experiences that they are exposed to,
Yeah.
it forms an imprint,
Right.
neuroplasticity, and it
Right.
becomes solid until you change it.
Yeah, Ben, this is so you have mentioned some things that are so important. First, trauma, even something simple as a spider, children in war zones. We have wars going on today, and any other event that a person may experience. So let's say that has happened. The person had this, let's call it some type of interruption in their normal existence. How can they, Ben, evolve past? Because you talk about reframing in your work as well. How can a person learn to reframe those experiences so that they may live a healthier life?
Right. um, we will have to overly simplify, and this is already a caveat to our listeners. We
Okay.
will have to come up with an overly simplistic approach.
Mm.
Um, it's similar to a magnet. Back in school, we would have this. We'd be given a paper clip, and we would rub it against a magnet,
Mm.
and the magnetism from the magnet would pass on to the paper clip, so that it can become a compass. If you put it on water, it will point to the true north.
Yeah.
Similarly, if we rub our traumatized brain, our memory crippled brain, with a positive magnet
Mm.
long enough, we would be able to imbibe the resourceful behaviors that we want. For example, um, Stephen, do you have any habit you want to cure? And I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Any habits I want to cure? Let me see. What habit do I have? Well, I'll
Or
tell you this.
yes, you don't
I'll
have to
tell
be. It doesn't have to be
yeah.
your personal habit.
Yeah, no, but I'll throw this one out because I wanted to talk with you about this. I have a neurological condition that makes it challenging to walk. So if there's something that I could cure, it would be, and there's no scientific reason for it, by the way. So that's something that I would throw at you. So,
Well, I would have to say we would need to know more information about it.
uh, okay.
For example, I was thinking, for example, about smoking or a habit
No,
that's
no, I don't know.
a garden variety habit
No.
that or
Um,
is there a habit you want to
okay,
take on?
I spend a lot of money.
Okay. And you spend a lot of money on any particular thing, or you just spend a
Uh,
lot of money,
um,
period?
no, business endeavors, that I invest in my business, and
Hmm.
yeah, I could be
And how,
excessive there.
right. And what emotion do you attach to that activity of spending money? And this is a non-judgment
Yeah.
conversation.
Okay. The emotion is that if I'm going to grow my business, that it's reasonable that I invest in the business, and as I invest in it, then I get a greater return as I stay with my business. That's the logic that I use when I spend money to support my business.
I don't see anything wrong. That's something that would be taught in any reputable graduate school.
Mm.
Why do you then consider it to be a challenge?
Because I mean, I do invest in it. It's just, so yeah. Sometimes I'm thinking I'm putting a little bit too much money in this business, into the Possibility Action Network, and it's taking
Right,
a while to grow for me to see the return, but we're growing, so I guess it
right,
is paying off. Yeah.
right. Well, normally it's just a matter of I remember when I was young, my mom would measure my height against the wall.
Uh,
So it's just a matter of metrics.
mm,
You put in and return on investment, you expect so much return.
yeah.
So I would take it from the tone of your wording. You're not meeting the return that you had expected to get.
Well, not yet, but we're moving in that direction. So
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah,
then again, there seems to be nothing wrong with what you're doing because
uh,
it might be a function of time. It
yeah,
might be a function of season. For example, I'm in the training and consulting business. Christmas is nobody trains, nobody consults. So if I'm not earning on Christmas, it's not because of anything on my wrongdoing.
yeah.
But you mentioned it, Stephen, and you're my friend now. We are now
Yes.
close friends. So I sense that it tugs in your heart in a way that does not make you sleep good. What emotion would you label your activity of investing in your the possibility network?
What emotion? Gosh, is eagerness an emotion? That's not it. Is that an emotion?
Eagerness,
Yeah,
eagerness counts.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're eager.
Mhm.
Um, Calibrate eagerness as you toward with relationship to investing in the possibility network. 0 to 10. 10
Oh,
being you're so eager,
mm, okay.
0 being
Yeah, yeah. I would give it an eight. An eight.
all right.
Yeah.
Now, is there any time in your life wherein you were eager, not necessarily in the realm of investing, but you would also use the emotion eagerness and it would be higher than 8?
Yes, I was pursuing a PhD,
All right.
and Ben, it was at a 10 because I was so hungry to complete the doctorate. That was like food. It's like everything was in that. So yeah, that was
Right.
a 10.
And did you encounter any difficulties in the journey from pursuing your PhD until you got it?
Stress,
Yes.
excessive stress.
Yes. And you're now a doctor.
Yes.
So it was all worth it.
Yeah, in retrospect.
Right.
uh, yeah.
And so we are all I'm saying is are we in a position to render a judgment on the investment eagerness that you are
Mhm.
putting into the possibility network,
Mhm.
or could it be similar to the PhD journey?
Indeed, it could be similar to the PhD journey. And the more things that, and like having you as a guest. I mean, I've been after you for a long time, and finally, you're sitting with me. So things are moving in the right direction for sure. But I want to stay with this thing because I'm still curious about the role of the brain in our health. And I'm going to throw a couple of other things at you, okay? And feel free to pass if you want to. So I'll pass on that question. But I'm curious about the role of the brain in certain chronic conditions that people have. Let me use one of them in the United States. I don't have diabetes, but in the US, my gosh, I've encountered children with diabetes. Does the brain play a role there, or is it lifestyle? Is there genetics? What do you think?
All of the above, because some people are genetically born with diabetes. But by the way, I'm not a medical doctor, folks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm just responding
Mm,
with the context of how the brain might be able to affect and influence our general bodily health. If
mm,
you have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, you're in it. And
mm.
then also lifestyle. Uh, the brain. I mentioned earlier about alcohol,
Yeah.
sugar also damages your brain. Stay
Uh-oh.
off it. Stay off it.
Okay. All right, good. I'm gonna
Uh,
take your advice on that one because I overdo sugar.
right. So now we know that there are many things that affect our brain.
Mm,
And again, we said that our brain is the one that determines our personality, how we act, and how we think. It
yeah.
basically determines who we are. We can
Mm,
even say mind or soul. If you cut off your brain, you're nobody. You can
mm,
cut off my arm, I'll still be Ben. You can take off all my teeth, I'll still be Ben. You can make
mm.
me blind, I'll still be Ben. Take
Right,
away my brain, zero Ben.
right,
So we have to take care of it, and we are just not, because we're thinking that we will live forever,
right.
and we will not.
Yeah.
So to your question about genetics, yes, it affects lifestyle changes, lifestyle behaviors. Yes, even lack of sleep has
Mm,
been shown to increase the likelihood of incurring diabetes.
mm. Okay.
Who would have known?
Who would have known that? Who I
Right.
wouldn't have thought that one. Let me ask you, because you mentioned a couple of things that you mentioned soul, for example. Is there a is the brain and the mind the same thing as you see it? Brain, mind, or is mind something soul that you used that word soul a moment ago?
It's a very controversial discussion,
Mm,
and I like the controversy because there's health in the interchange of opinions. But I would just like to keep it centered where I come from. That all of these three elements, whether there's one and the same, are all important.
mm,
So we should take care of our brain, we should take care of our mind, and we should take care of our soul.
mm.
For example, happiness. I've never met anybody who says, I want to wake up miserable tomorrow.
Right. No one says
Everybody
that.
wants to be happy. And I do coaching work. And one of the first questions I ask is, what do you want?
Oh,
And they say they want to be happy. And I go,
yeah.
how does happiness look for you? They have no freaking idea.
Mm,
So I'm saying, how do we go from here if we don't even know where you're headed?
mm,
I teach the Waze. Is Waze well known in the States, Stephens?
mm.
Waze, the navigation app,
Um,
or
I'm
or,
I'm not sure.
or let's say
Yeah.
Uber.
Well, we have
Uber,
navigation apps. There are navigation apps, a variety of them.
right?
But
Okay, so in the Philippines, it's what we have is Waze.
mm,
So if you were using a navigation app, there are four questions that would be needed from you.
okay.
Number one, where are you? Number two, where do you want to go? Number three, how do you want to go there?
Mm,
And if it's a place that's unknown to you, how do you know you've arrived?
mm,
And you can actually use that as a self-coaching tool.
mm.
Where am I? And we approach the new year,
Right.
where am I? Where do I want to go? how do I want to go there, and how do I know I've reached that point?
Yeah.
And sadly, even adults don't even know the answers to these basic and fundamental questions.
Yeah.
So, toward the discussion of the soul, of the brain, the mind, the soul, as long as the brain, the mind, the soul knows where they are, where they want to go, how they want to go there, and would know that they've reached it. For
Mm,
example, if we talk about spirituality,
mm,
there are many beliefs in the world, and I respect all of them.
mm.
For as long as that individual knows that that belief will take him or her to where he wants to be at the
Right.
end of his life.
Understood. Yeah. So let me ask you another question. Where does stage fright come from? Comes from stage fright. Where does that come from?
Right. We are only born with two natural fears:
Okay.
fear of falling. That's why, friends, if you throw a baby in the air, catch them,
Uh,
catch them. Okay. And then second is fear of loud noises. So don't make loud noises to infants. Those are
okay.
natural fears.
Mm,
Or all other fears are acquired. Now,
mm,
when they did a survey, uh, public speaking would always be at least in the top three.
yeah.
So you have fear of dying would always be there, and then public speaking would be there. Now our brain is programmed to keep us alive. Like we mentioned, the limbic system
Mm,
is the emotional brain.
mm,
Was the one of the earliest parts of the brain to be developed. During that time, they were just concerned about finding out if there's a dinosaur, if there's fire, if there's food. Right now, if you have a credit card, you will survive without leaving your house.
that's
So
right.
we don't have that kind of threat anymore. But back then, the fear was ingrained in us. That's why the amygdala, the limbic brain, the emotional brain, is a threat detection machine. Now,
Mm,
threat is actually neutral. A lot of people give it a bad rap.
mm,
In the same way as pain. I used to think that I wish I don't experience pain. But if
mm.
we don't experience pain, our bodies would be riddled with scars by now
Okay.
because we would be bumping into walls and we don't even
Right.
know about it.
Mm,
So, threat is actually good.
mm,
It keeps us alive and it gives us the benefit of a doubt. Because
mm.
if we're walking down a dark road and there's something that's slithering, if we assume that it's a snake, then it's a safe assumption,
That's
as
right.
opposed to just walking on straight and it happens to be a cobra anyway.
Mm,
So threat in and by itself is okay, and the amygdala is a threat detection machine.
mm,
So when we go in front of people, we fear rejection unless
mm,
we are at the very onset of our life. When we were young, whatever we did, whether we fell or we did something crazy, we got approval. And I've
mm,
never come across somebody like that.
mm,
Even for example, think of all the billionaires that we know right now,
mm,
the Bill Gates and the Mark Zuckerbergs. They didn't have it easy. Bill Gates was rejected by so many companies.
mm.
J.K. Rowling, the ones who wrote Harry Potter, was rejected by so many companies. And this is already during their adulthood. So if you're young and you get a lot of affirmation, you may not be subject to stage fright because you have a lot of emotional support on your knapsack. But
Right.
if growing up you have a question, you there are times when you get affirmed, there are times when you get punished.
Yeah.
And then when you come in front of a crowd who is unknown,
Mm,
you have no idea what to expect.
mm, mm.
And also we have I'll throw in a word. It's called homeostasis.
Yeah.
Our body is just trying to keep balance.
Mm,
So, for example, you become very nervous, just breathe, it's gonna come down. You cannot be nervous 24 hours. In the
mm.
same way, you cannot be happy 24 hours. Your body
Right.
would just go down to its baseline eventually.
Mhm,
So when you're called to go on stage, all of a sudden your body kicks up into its arousal state. That's why I don't know if you noticed that when you give a speech, In the first few minutes, you might feel nervous,
Yeah.
but the longer you get into it, you get the groove of it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it settles down. But by
That's
that time, you already messed up your talk anyway.
yeah, okay. So this stage fright is something that you may learn growing up. So what about, and this is going to be a more difficult one. What about emotional disorders? Where do they come from?
Again, it depends.
Mm,
It's some are genetically wired into us.
mm,
Um, for example, if the mother was taking drugs while the pregnancy was going on,
mm,
those things would pass on to the fetus, to the unborn child.
yeah.
If the mother was carrying the child in a very violent and unhealthy environment, even that environment would carry on into the unborn child. So, or anything that is sudden and with force.
Mm,
Again, the example would be the spider.
mm,
Any if a young child, because we mentioned that the prefrontal cortex, our
mm,
ability to make sense of whether or not the thing that we are looking into is actually a threat or not,
mm,
is only fully formed at age 24.
mm,
So go back to age 2, when
yeah.
all you have is the limbic system, the emotional system,
Right.
whose primary role is to detect threats.
Yeah.
We have what is called the negativity bias.
Ah, yeah.
Stephen, Stephen, if you do 9 good things and 1 bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'll bet what is the one thing that you will think of before you sleep tonight?
Yep. The bad thing.
One bad thing.
That's
And
right.
the same with everybody else. They will
Mm,
forget 9 good things you did. Stephen was bad today.
yeah.
And that is actually a bias we keep because the brain is one of the lightest organs. It only weighs 2% of our total body weight. So if you weigh 100 pounds, your brain only weighs 2 pounds.
Yeah.
The heaviest organ we have is the skeletal system, our bones. But the brain, even though it's light, is the
Mm,
most energy consumptive organ of our body. It
mm,
consumes 20% of our total caloric intake.
mm,
And it wants to conserve that because if it runs out of fuel, we die.
mm,
So it wants to conserve that. And in order to conserve that, it has a lot of programs.
mm,
Number one, it prefers certainty because if things are certain, it doesn't have to think. It hates change. And when
mm.
you think about it, all of leadership is actually change management.
Right.
That's why when I do my training about leadership, I go, did you know that what you are tasked to do is actually against the programming of the natural brain?
Mm,
And they have to come to grips with that.
mm,
And another thing is that it takes shortcuts. It has biases. It does
mm.
not take the time to investigate and look out for all the information needed. For
Yeah.
example, you're going out on a commercial on a tourist road and you see that there's a restaurant and there's a long line of people. What conclusion would you come up with, Stephen?
Long line of people. They're doing a lot of business. The food must be good.
And it happens that all of them are paid relatives,
Uh-huh.
which is a very common marketing practice.
Okay.
So that's called the bandwagon effect. We
Mm.
follow what the masses would do without thinking whether or not it is actually aligned with our values. A
Right. Got
second
it.
is confirmation bias.
Mm,
Anything that does not fit in into what we believe to be true, we discard.
mm,
So
mm,
our brain has biases. So toward our behavior, all of those things come into play. So even
mm,
though we're very smart, we want to conserve energy. We do
mm,
not think. And one more thing, our brain predicts.
mm,
That's why you would recognize a chair. You would say a chair. We've been taught that the chair has 4 legs, but
mm,
because of artistic freedom, you might design a chair with only 3 legs. But
mm.
your brain would still recognize that's a chair, or you would
Right.
recognize your friends from behind
Right.
because you know them, or not from the face, not from the front, because of prediction. And yet, what do they teach us about communication? We should listen attentively,
Mm.
but our brain actually predicts the next word you're going to say.
Wow.
So there are
Okay.
many programs that actually
Right.
contradict
Right. Okay.
what we're taught in business. Go ahead.
Okay. I got to go back to negative bias though, because because you said that's just the way it is. Can we change that negative bias?
It begins with awareness.
Mhm.
It's actually it's actually born out of the programming of the brain to keep us alive. So
Mm,
going back to the amygdala, it's a threat detection machine.
mm,
Our brain is not concerned with us being happy. Spoiler
mm,
alert, everybody. People
mhm,
think that our brain wants to keep us happy. The brain doesn't care. The
mm.
brain just cares that you and I are alive. So
Okay,
because of that, it just looks for what's bad.
okay. So
If you look at,
awareness can help with this negative
yeah,
bias.
awareness can help.
Awareness
For
can help. Okay.
example, you're going into a meeting, and you know that there's bad blood, but
Yeah.
it's a very important meeting for you. It's a, for example, a business or family meeting.
Yeah.
Then even before you come in, you can practice reframing. Try to, similar to the, for example, the Mona Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
If you change the way it's framed from regal wood,
Mm-hmm.
frame it to newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
frame it with leaves, frame it with polka dots.
Yeah.
The Mona Lisa is the same, but the way you appreciate it changes
Yeah.
drastically. So even
Yeah.
before you go into the meeting, reframe it positively, and then say, I know that looking at this, just seeing his face would rile me up.
Yeah.
Then start preparing for that emotionally.
Right. I've come to say sometimes if something comes up in my brain, I say, I don't believe anything you say. I just don't believe it. And look, depression is running rampant, I mean, throughout the world because of all the things going on. Is there anything that you can tell us about the brain that can help people, deal with that emotional disturbance?
Right. Uh, I say if you're sad, you said, and said is sleep well, exercise, and diet. And
Okay.
people don't like it because they want over the counter medication
Yeah, yeah.
like
Okay.
benzos. Forget
Yeah.
benzos, it will
Uh-huh.
screw up your brain. If you're
Okay.
sad, you said, you'll be
Yeah.
surprised. Just 3 nights of good sleep.
Uh-huh.
Exercise releases endorphins. These are
Mm-hmm.
positive
Mm-hmm.
emotional neurochemicals.
Mm-hmm.
And diet, uh,
Yeah.
low fat, low carb diet
Yeah.
will
That's
help you.
that's a good those are good suggestions. I mean, simple, sleep, eat
Exercise,
well,
yes.
and exercise. Yeah, that's great. I love it. Well, look, Ben, this has been my pleasure sitting with you and talk with you. And you are a wealth of information. We didn't even get to things like performance, leadership. But so that means that in 2024, 2025, we're going to try to get you back. So thank you so much for being with us today, Ben.
Stephen, the pleasure is mine. It's a high honor to know you over LinkedIn. Friends, follow Stephen Middleton,
Thank you.
doctor, on LinkedIn. He has good posts, he has good insights about work and life. Follow his podcast, subscribe, and it's really a high honor for me to meet you. Even my puppy saying yes.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, you have been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Ben Ampil. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day